Who was Jack the Ripper? They call him a phantom, a shadow that slipped through the dark alleys of Whitechapel, leaving terror in his wake. Jack the Ripper wasn't just a murderer, he was a ghost who rewrote history, creating one of the most chilling mysteries of all time. 5 women who were brutally killed are forever tied to his name. But who was he? A deranged doctor, a vengeful outsider, or someone hidden in plain sight? Today, we dive into the horrifying case that has fascinated the world for over a century. The Whitechapel Murders, a city in fear. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, known as the Canonical Five, were not wealthy or powerful. They were women living through the harsh reality of Whitechapel, a place that was as much a victim of this tale as they were. It was a district of contrast, where the glittering wealth of London's West End stood in stark contrast to the poverty and despair of the East End. By day, its streets were crowded with market stalls, bustling pubs, and people desperately trying to scrape by. By night, those same streets turned dark, dangerous, and mysterious. Life in Whitechapel was unforgiving, especially for women. Work was scarce, wages were low, and many turned to sex work as a last resort to survive. Lodging houses offered temporary shelter for pennies, but they were overcrowded and unsafe. Hunger, disease, and violence were constant companions. It was in this environment of desperation and vulnerability that the Ripper struck. He was a shadow preying on those already struggling to survive. The Ripper's first known victim was Mary Ann Nichols, or Polly, as her friend called her. Polly was a 43-year-old mother of 5 who had fallen on hard times. Like many others in Whitechapel, she lived in and out of lodging houses, often unable to afford even a night's shelter. On August 31, 1888, Polly was found dead in Bucks Row. Her throat had been slashed and her abdomen was mutilated. It was a crime so brutal, it shocked even hardened police officers. Just over a week later, on September 8, Annie Chapman became the Ripper's second victim. Annie, a widow in her late 40s, had been living a similar life of poverty and struggle. Her body was found in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street, and the scene was even more gruesome than Polly's. Annie's throat had been deeply cut, and her organs had been removed and placed beside her. The precision of the attack suggested the killer might have some anatomical knowledge, leading to speculation that he could be a doctor or a butcher. The terror escalated on September 30 with the infamous double event. Elizabeth Stride, known as Long Liz, was found in Berners Street with a single slash across her throat. Some believe the killer was interrupted before he could complete his dirty work. Less than an hour later, the Ripper claimed another victim, Catherine Eddowes. Her mutilated body was discovered in Meter Square, with her face and abdomen savagely disfigured. The killer had removed her kidney, adding to the growing horror surrounding these crimes. The Ripper's final act came on November 9, with the murder of Mary Jane Kelly, a 25-year-old who lived in a small room in Miller's Court. Mary Jane's murder was the most horrific of them all. Her body was discovered in her home, mutilated beyond recognition. Her face was destroyed, her abdomen disemboweled, and parts of her body scattered throughout the room. This time, the killer had the privacy and time to carry out his darkest fantasies without fear of interruption. Escalating fear and chaos. By the time Mary Jane Kelly's body was discovered, Whitechapel was in chaos. The murders had created a climate of fear unlike anything the city had experienced before. Women refused to walk the street alone, and those who had no choice often carried weapons or traveled in groups. The Ripper had turned Whitechapel's already dark streets into a hunting ground. The media played a significant role in amplifying the fear. Newspapers competed for readers by publishing lurid details of the murders, often sensationalizing the crime and speculating wildly about the killer. They gave him his infamous name, Jack the Ripper, after a letter supposedly sent by the killer himself. Whether or not the letter was authentic, the name stuck, turning the unknown murderer into a legend overnight. Vigilante groups formed, patrolling the streets in hope of catching the killer. The police, meanwhile, faced mounting criticisms for their inability to solve the case. The Ripper seemed untouchable, slipping through the cracks of a policing system that was ill-equipped to handle a criminal of his cunning and brutality. The murders suddenly stopped. And then, as suddenly as they began, the murders stopped. After Mary Jane Kelly's death, there were no more bodies, no more taunting letters, no more clues. The Ripper vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. leaving behind only fear, grief, and an enduring mystery. Was he caught? Did he die? Or did he simply move on, leaving Whitechapel to pick up the pieces? The sudden silence only added to the intrigue, ensuring that Jack the Ripper would remain one of history's greatest unsolved cases. As the Whitechapel murders unfolded, London's Metropolitan Police faced a challenge unlike anything they had encountered before. Jack the Ripper wasn't just killing, he was defying capture in ways that exposed the cracks in Victorian-era policing. The investigation would come to be remembered as much for its frustrations as for its grim discoveries. The challenges of the investigation. In 1888, forensic science was in its infancy. Fingerprints hadn't yet been adopted as a tool for law enforcement, and DNA analysis was over a century away. Investigators relied heavily on witness accounts, physical evidence like blood or clothing, and intuition. But in the narrow, overcrowded streets of Whitechapel, finding a reliable witness was almost impossible. Whitechapel was a densely populated district where anonymity reigned. Thousands of people came and went daily, many living transient lives in lodging houses. This environment provided the perfect cover for a killer who struck quickly and vanished just as fast. Despite stationing additional officers throughout the area, the police found themselves chasing shadows. Compounding their difficulties was the lack of communication between various police forces. At the time, the Metropolitan Police and the City of London Police operated separately, with little cooperation. Catherine Eddowes' murder, which occurred just within the boundaries of the City of London, exposed its jurisdictional divide, further hampering the investigation. The police's frustration. Inside Scotland Yard, frustration was mounting. Detectives interviewed hundreds of suspects and followed countless leads, yet they were no closer to the killer. They even turned to unconventional methods, including consulting psychics and medical professionals to profile the murderer. Some officers suspected that the killer was a local man who blended easily into the community. Others theorized that he might have been a skilled surgeon, based on the precision of the mutilations. But none of these theories led to a breakthrough. Each passing week without an arrest deepened the public's despair and the police's embarrassment. As the murders continued, it became clear that Jack the Ripper was playing a game that the authorities weren't equipped to win. Theories and suspects. Over the years, countless theories have emerged, each attempting to unmask the shadowy figure behind the brutal Whitechapel murders. From quack doctors to troubled barbers to whispers of royal conspiracies, the list of suspects is as intriguing as it is varied. One of the earliest and most controversial suspects was Francis Tumblety, an American quack doctor who was in London at the time of the murders. Tumblety was a flamboyant and deeply misogynistic character, known for his bizarre behavior and disturbing habits. He reportedly collected anatomical specimens, including human uteruses, which fueled suspicions about his possible involvement in the murders. After being questioned by the police, Tumblety fled to the United States, a move that only deepened suspicions. Was he running from justice, or was it mere coincidence? Another prominent name on the suspect list is Aaron Kosminski, a Polish barber who lived in Whitechapel. Kosminski was known to have a history of mental illness and erratic behavior. Witnesses reportedly placed him near the scenes of the crimes, and some investigators believed his hatred of women fit the profile of the Ripper. Decades later, DNA evidence from a shawl claimed to belong to one of the victims was said to link Kosminski to the murder, but the reliability of this evidence has been widely disputed. Then there's Montague John Druitt, a barrister and teacher whose life ended in suicide shortly after the last canonical murder. Druitt was described as sexually insane by those who knew him, and his death coincides suspiciously with the sudden stop of the Ripper's killing. However, no concrete evidence has ever tied Druitt directly to the crimes. Was his death a tragic coincidence, or did it mark the end of Jack the Ripper's reign of terror? Modern investigations and new theories. Modern theories suggested the Ripper may not have been a single individual at all. Could the murders have been the work of multiple killers, or even copycats inspired by the original crimes? Some researchers have proposed that the Ripper may have been a woman, an idea known as the Jill the Ripper theory. This unconventional hypothesis argues that a midwife or nurse, someone with medical knowledge and access to victims, might have been responsible. Another intriguing theory is that Jack the Ripper could have been Thomas Cottbush, a medical student institutionalized for violent behavior shortly after the murders. Like Kosminski, his profile aligns with some aspects of the case, but no definitive evidence linked him to the crimes. Could we ever know the truth? Despite the passage of over a century, the case of Jack the Ripper still captivates historians and criminologists. Advances in forensic science continue to offer hope that new breakthroughs might one day solve the mystery. Some believe that the killer's identity is already known, hidden in police files or historical records yet to be fully uncovered. But perhaps part of the Ripper's enduring appeal is the fact that we don't know who he was. The ambiguity leaves room for endless theorizing, turning the case into a puzzle that has intrigued generations. Over a century later, Jack the Ripper remains a chilling enigma, a puzzle the world has yet to solve. His gruesome crimes expose the darkest corners of humanity, but his identity remains hidden. What do you think? Could the truth ever surface? Share your theories in the comments, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more true crime mysteries, and join the discussion. The search for answers continues, and maybe, one day, we'll uncover the truth.